So now that you've had a chance to try some on your own, see how you did. Are these the answers that you got to the 3 practice problems? Going to leave them up there for a moment so you can check your work. If you got these answers and you had no questions, then please proceed on to the next part of the Nearpod, all about the remainder and factor theorems. If you had a question, please stay around and we'll go through these and see if we can work it out. So the first problem, our divisor is the x plus 3. Now before I fill this all in, are they all in descending powers? Do we have every single power? We've got x to the third, x squared, x to the first, no x's. So that looks good. This thing's longer than I thought. Okay. So we're going to take these 2 terms into these 2 terms. The first answer is going to go over the 5x squared. What do we multiply times x to get 3x squared? I'm sorry, what do we multiply times x to get 3x cubed? Well, that would have to be 3x squared. And now the next step is to multiply that, what we got from the x, the first term here and the first term here, multiply that times the entire x plus 3. So 3x squared times x, 3x squared times a positive 3, be a positive 9x squared. And the next step, the one that we've got to be careful with, is the subtraction. I strongly recommend parentheses. So these first 2 should cancel out when they subtract. And then we have 5x squared subtract 9x squared. Well, that's going to come out negative 4x squared. And then bring down the next term and keep dividing. So we have these 2 into these 2. I will take the first term here into the first term here. What do we multiply times x to get negative 4x to the second? Well, we need a negative 4 and we need another x. Because we need a negative 4x, it's going to be written as minus 4x. And notice the x squareds line up, the x's line up. So we're going to multiply negative 4x times both of these. We know the negative 4x times the x is going to come out to negative 4x squared, because that's why we picked it. And then the negative 4x times the positive 3 is going to be a negative 12x. And then we're going to subtract. And a negative 4x squared subtract a negative 4x squared, that's going to zero out. Negative 11x subtract a negative 12x is negative 11x plus 12x. This is just going to be 1x. Bring down the plus 3. And then divide. So what do we have to do to get from x to 1x? X divided into 1x is going to go 1 time. And it's a positive 1, so I'm going to write a plus 1 up here. And then we multiply 1 times the x plus 3. And when we subtract, there's nothing left. So this x plus 3 that we divided by must be a factor. And in fact, this quotient that we got must also be a factor. And if we were using this to solve an equation and find out what the x-intercepts are, well, we know that this is going to be a factor, so we can get an x-intercept from this. We could try factoring this, or we could do the quadratic formula and find out what the other roots are, which took and broke down a large polynomial into its smaller parts. So we'll try to break this next polynomial down too. We're dividing by 2x minus 1. Check first, do we have descending powers? Do we have all the powers? X to the third, x to the second, x to the first, constant, which is really times x to the 0. It's all there, just waiting for us. So we have two terms. We're going to divide into these two terms. First answer is going to go over the 6x squared. And to find out how to start, we're going to divide 2x, the first term here, into the first term here. So we would need another 2x squared. And then that's going to get multiplied times the entire divisor here. 2x squared times 2x, 4x to the third, 2x squared times a negative 1, and then the part that we have to be careful about is the subtraction. The first terms do very nicely cancel out, and they're supposed to, and then a 6x squared minus a negative 2x squared will be 6x squared plus 2x squared. So this would give us 8x squared. Bring down the next term and continue to divide. So this time we're dividing a 2x into the 8x squared, which would have to be a 4x, a positive 4x. And we're going to take that positive 4x now and multiply it times this whole divisor. So we have 8x squared minus 4x. And subtract. They should cancel out, they do. Negative 10x, subtract negative 4x. Well, that's negative 10x plus 4x. So that should be negative 6x. And we still have one more term to bring down. But we're almost done. To get the last term in our answer, what do you multiply times 2x to get negative 6x? Or divide 2x into negative 6x. And that would be a negative 3, so I'm going to write it as subtract 3. And then that negative 3 gets multiplied times both of these. So that'd be negative 6x. And a negative 3 times a negative 1 is a plus 3. And we're going to subtract those. Well, the 6x's, negative 6x minus negative 6x, they cancel out. And 4 minus 3 is a 1. It almost came out evenly. If this had only been a 3 on the end, it would be a factor, but it's not. There's a little something left over. This is not a factor. This is not a factor. We have a remainder of 1, which we're going to write over what we're dividing by. And this is very useful in calculus, a problem like this. Because they don't have an integral rule for division, but we can attack this part. One more problem. We know the divisor is x minus 1. And it's in descending powers, but it looks like we've lost a couple of the powers here, which isn't good to lose your powers. So we've got an x cubed. We have to fill in that there are no x squareds. Not only are there no x squareds, there are no x to the firsts either, and we have to fill that in. And then the constant on the end. We need all of these place values to be in place in order to complete the problem. So we have two terms into two terms. First answer is going to go there. If we divide the first term here into the first term here, x divided into x to the third, or you can say, what do you have to multiply times x to get x to the third? We need an x to the second. So we're going to take x squared times all of this. It's going to be x to the third minus x squared. And we get to subtract those. These go away. 0 minus negative 1x squared. Well, that would be 0 plus 1x squared. Bring down the next term. Even though it's a 0x, we still bring it down because it's holding that place value. And now we divide x into x squared, or 1x into 1x squared. And so we would need a 1x. And you don't have to put the 1 if you don't want to. And then we'd be multiplying 1x times both of these. We get 1x squared and 1x times negative 1. And we subtract. Well, the x squareds cancel out like they're supposed to. 0 minus a negative 1 is 0 plus a positive 1, so we have 1x here, or just x. Bring down this plus 1 that's been waiting. Now, if this had been a minus 1, it would have come out evenly, but it's not, so what do we multiply times x to get 1x? Now it had to be a positive 1, and then 1 times x minus 1 is x minus 1. And then we're going to subtract. Well, x minus x, that's 0. 1 minus negative 1 is 1 plus 1. So we actually have a remainder of 2. And we're going to write it as a fraction. It's a positive 2, so we're going to put plus 2 over whatever our divisor was. And that's how they got those answers that were up at the top. If you have further questions, please contact me. If you don't have any questions, please move on to the next part of this lesson.